Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, it's not Zone of Blast, it's Blast Zone. This is Lord of War. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Lord of War, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Hey, I'm walking here. Oh. That's kind of all I got to report. Not much excitement going on with me. Every day, I'm doing just a little bit of walking, and every day, I'm doing just a little bit of living.
Get busy living or get busy dying. Isn't that what they say?
I heard that before, yeah.
So you're getting busy doing the better one.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, though.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm tired. Like, it's a strangely warm and snow-free winter in New England here. But
you told me that.
Like I mentioned last week's episode, the forecast was pretty shitty for March, and it was. So it was cold and snowy, and it's still pretty cold. I'm ready for springtime now, please. But all is well because Top Chef premieres tonight, and longtime listeners will know that I'm a huge Top Chef fan, so I'm very excited for the return of that. Spoiler alert, I'm probably going to be talking about that next week for Show and Tell.
That's very exciting. I hope it's a good season. What makes a good season?
Oh, it's an international all-star season. So they have, there's a Top Chef Japan and a Top Chef Australia and a Top Chef France. So they're basically taking all-stars and or winners. Like some of the people coming back won their season completely. They're champions. Like actually the guy who won the most recent US season is coming back to it's like, why would you come back if you already won? But this is like the best of the best. It's the Champions Cup.
That's exciting.
And it's international for the first time. They're filming it in Europe. So what makes a good season is good chefs making creative food, good challenges. If the chefs are good, but the challenges are boring or they don't play to the strengths of the competition, then it's a bad season. But they've kind of got it dialed in now. It's a very drama-free show. It's very friendly.
Nice.
Everybody tends to get along. They leave all that I'm not here to make friends shit at home for the most part.
It's grown up a little bit.
Yeah, to the point where even if somebody comes in with that type of attitude, they almost get the side eye from everybody else and they just get ignored the whole time.
Okay.
It's a nice break from some of the more catty reality TV competition shows.
That's a good quality to try to engender in reality TV competitions overall.
Yeah, it's the crown jewel of reality TV to me. It's got it figured out, and just such a great judging panel. I'm so excited. It's a big event in my house when Top Chef comes back. But what have you been watching, Ian, now that I've waxed poetic about Top Chef for a few minutes?
Well, I dug something old, warmed up some old leftovers out of the back of the fridge. A movie by the name of Michael Clayton. You might have heard of it.
I might have.
Back from 2007. You're the one who told me about it. I watched it a while ago when you first said, you gotta watch it. I watched it. I thought it was incredible. And so a couple of years have passed and I'm like, I need to see Michael Clayton again. For anybody who doesn't know, it's written and directed by Tony Gilroy, who you might know from some of the 4 Bourne movies that he wrote and or directed, and a little show called Andor.
Yes, sir.
Which some people thought was okay. Stars George Clooney as the titular Michael Clayton. And it's just one of the best movies I've ever seen. In my opinion, it's one of the best movies ever made. When you explain it to people, they're like, oh, like a legal drama, corporate litigation. It sounds dull, but somehow the magic is not in the story. The magic is in the people, starting with Clooney as Michael Clayton. It's a character with so many facets and so many subplots, and they don't drop the ball on any of them. This is a guy who's got this complex relationship with one of the main other characters, his colleague, who goes off the rails and
kind of a mentor.
Yeah, his job for half the movie is dealing with this mentor who's off the rails, but he's got so many other things going on. He's got a relationship with his son that plays absolutely real, feels amazing. He's got a younger brother who's an addict. He's got an older brother who's a cop. He's got a gambling addiction that he's trying to get over. He's got a career that he's trying to manage, and he's in midlife and not happy with where he's going. So he's got to deal with his boss, who's played by Sidney Pollack in a small role, who's great.
So good. He's got a restaurant that failed that he's got to pick up pieces from.
It's so many things, and they just execute every one of these subplots so beautifully. They all feel really real. They all draw you in, and the performances are great. Tom Wilkinson plays Arthur, who's his friend and colleague and mentor, in just a stunning performance. Tilda Swinton is awesome as the antagonist, who is the villain, but is so flawed and so vulnerable in weird yet endearing ways that you love her. She actually got Best Supporting Actress for that, but I can't believe that it didn't win. It got nominated in a bunch of categories, Best Picture and Best Director, but it only winner was Tilda out of that group. and I can't believe it didn't sweep the Oscars.
Well, 2007 is, in my opinion, the greatest movie year of all time. So there was quite a lot of competition that year.
Okay, that's fair.
And my favorite movie of all time won Best Picture that year, No Country for Old Men.
Oh, I forgot that was 2007. Okay, yeah.
But Michael Clayton is also probably my third favorite movie of all time. So it's
they're right up there for me too.
Yeah. They're both just masterpieces. And Tony Gilroy, let's make sure we give him all his flowers, because he also wrote and kind of directed Rogue One, which I know a lot of people have really fond feelings towards as far as the more recent Star Wars movies go, including myself. I really enjoy that movie. I'm also a Gareth Edwards fan. It's hard to say who did what on that.
Yes.
And so I give them both a lot of credit for it. And his brother Dan is a fucking kick-ass director too. He made Nightcrawler, which is one of my favorite movies the last 10 years.
Oh, damn. Talented family.
Yeah, very talented family.
Like the Scott brothers. Are they brothers?
Yeah, they are brothers.
Okay.
Yes, Tony and Ridley Scott are brothers.
Yeah, for a minute I thought I had cooked that up in my mind, but yes.
Were brothers? Do they stop being brothers?
Yeah, I guess they're still brothers, but we miss Tony.
Well, now it got sad. R.I.P. Tony. I've watched something a little more recent, but something I cannot wax quite as poetic about because it's pretty recent and also pretty spoilerable, which is a hard word to say. I don't know why I always put myself through saying the word spoilerable. I watched Knock at the Cabin, the new M. Night Shyamalan, Dave Bautista, apocalyptic thriller drama. And the most I'll really say about it is that I liked it, but I tend to give M. Night a little more leeway than some other people do. I would say he's gotten better at writing dialogue, if he indeed wrote the script. I'm not even sure if he did. It feels a little less wooden, a little less stiff. And when it feels wooden and stiff, like a lot of what the Bautista character says, it seems to be by design.
Okay.
It doesn't really have a major twist like a lot of his movies have, where everything kind of hinges on that. But it is a twisty movie, if you understand what I mean by the difference between those two things. There are surprises and things you don't necessarily expect, but there's not one pivot point where your whole perspective on the movie kind of changes. It just gradually reveals itself.
That's better.
It's harder to do, but it's more rewarding, I think.
He did it perfectly in Sixth Sense and then never again the same because it's too hard to move.
But it's pretty breezy. It's not breezy is not the right word. It's pretty short. It's a short movie and it's pretty intense. I think M. Night is underrated for comedy. I find a lot of his movies to be really really funny, intentionally so, not like The Happening. And that's present here too. I do recommend it. I think people should check it out, give it a chance. I'm interested in this stage of his career where he's self-financing a lot of his movies and just doing whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah.
And, it's fun to watch. I think this is a good place for him.
I'm glad to see that. We roasted him so hard for Lady in the Water, which he deserved every
Deservedly. Yeah, I don't regret any of it.
But I do think he has certain talents. And so I like when he can line them up and make a successful movie.
Yeah, I know. And there was some controversy, I guess. It's based on a book called The Cabin at the End of the World.
Okay.
I guess they changed quite a bit from the book, which is fine. You have artistic license, but they've also downplayed the relationship to the book in the marketing of the movie, which I guess the author is annoyed about because theoretically that would mean a lot more book sales for him.
Sure.
If they put based on The Cabin at the End of the World on the posters and whatnot. But I think most people liked it. I didn't really pay attention to the critical consensus on this one, but yeah, I'd say check it out.
I'm going to check it out. It's one of those, I don't want to know too much about it. I thank you for not revealing too much. And now I'm excited to see it.
Speaking of movies that you're excited to see, Lord of War. That's not a good segue, but that is this week's movie. This is a movie that I praised pretty highly. I think a little bit in the War Dogs episode. And also when I was hyping it up as this week's episode, we just decided to make it this week's episode at the last minute to give it a nice contrast with War Dogs.
Yeah.
But this is a movie I didn't see in theaters. Weirdly enough, when I was doing my box office research, I went to the theaters that weekend it opened, but I saw The Exorcism of Emily Rose and not this movie.
Oh, okay.
But I caught it pretty soon after it came out on DVD. I was in that stage of my life where I was like, any movie that seemed semi-interesting, I was getting a DVD. I worked at Circuit City at the time. Use your imagination.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I loved it immediately. And I watched it several times over the years. This most recent couple times watching it, I found it a little more flawed than my memory had allowed.
That happens.
But I still think it's a really solid, well-made movie. It's maybe lacking, if I could sum it up in one word, passion. It's just very subdued throughout. But what did you know about this movie before we sat down to start researching it?
I didn't know a lot. As I mentioned at the end of our last episode, I remembered the poster. I'm like, was this the movie where Nick Cage is made out of bullets? And I looked it up. He is, in fact. The poster is a very striking piece of artwork. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes because it's just interesting to look at.
Sure.
Other than that, I don't remember watching it or trying to watch it. I think I acknowledged its existence and then I filed it away in my brain in the slot between Dogs of War and War Dogs. Like, okay, there's my arms dealer movies.
We should have done a whole arms dealer month. I don't know if there's 4 or 5 arms dealer movies that we could have dug up.
Yeah, not sure. We could have stretched it.
But it's got an interesting parallel to current real world events that I'll expand on in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Which I didn't even realize when we decided to make this week's movie. And then when I started researching, I was like, oh, this is fortuitous.
Yeah.
That it worked out that way. Now it feels a little topical. But should I get into the making of the movie and kind of what inspired inspired it?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
Okay. Victor Bout was born on January 13th, 1967 in Tajikistan. Maybe. Probably. A lot about Victor's early life is up for debate, but what we know for sure is that he served in the Soviet Armed Forces as a lieutenant colonel until its dissolution in 1991 when he got into the air freight business. He would then begin a successful career as a smuggler and arms dealer using the contacts he had established in his time with the military until he was arrested on March 6, 2008 in Bangkok and eventually extradited to the US, where he was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years for conspiring to kill American citizens and officials, delivery of anti-aircraft missiles, and providing aid to a terrorist organization.
This guy sounds like a lot of fun at a party.
Bout's arrest and extradition would cause widespread protests in Russia, and he would re-enter the public eye in May 2022 when President Joe Biden offered to return him to Russia for the release of WNBA star Brittany Griner, who was being held in Russia for marijuana possession. And the swap would eventually be made just about a month ago, I think. It sounds like a story fit for Hollywood, and it is, but interestingly, large portions of Bout's story had already been told. Bout was the main inspiration for fictional arms dealer Yuri Orlov, portrayed by Nicolas Cage and Andrew Niccol's 2005 crime drama film Lord of War.
Ooh, I've heard of this.
Niccol also wrote the script for the film and found he was unable to get American studios to fund the picture due to the negative light the US and its role in the international arms trade is portrayed in.
We're looking for more of a Top Gun and less of a Top Gun runner.
Niccol was eventually able to secure $50 million in funding for the film and rounded out the cast with reliable names like Eamonn Walker, Ethan Hawke, Bridget Moynihan, Jared Leto, and Ian Holm. Filmed from August to November of 2004 in locations as diverse as South Africa, the Czech Republic, Utah, and Brooklyn.
Oh yes, Brooklyn. So it's continental then.
The globe-trotting thriller would be set for a September 16, 2005 release. Reviews for the film were mostly positive, as it sits at 61% on Rotten Tomatoes, with Roger Ebert even giving it 3.5 out of 4 stars. Theatergoers were less enthusiastic, though, as it opened in third place with just over $9 million and declined steadily from there. Eventually, it would earn $72.6 million worldwide, not enough to turn a profit, but it built up a sizable cult fan base and received renewed interest when Bout re-entered the public's eye.
Fascinating. I didn't know that when I watched it. You clued me into this after.
The Merchant of Death, which he was affectionately referred to as. And I remember, I knew that line in this movie where Yuri says, they called me the Merchant of Death. And then I remembered hearing that they wanted to trade Brittany Griner for a guy called the Merchant of Death.
Right.
But I'll be honest, there's a bunch of people with that nickname. So it didn't okay. It didn't immediately draw that comparison in my mind. But then you start reading about the real Bout's life and you're like, okay, I see some parallels there. It's not clearly a one-to-one translation of his life story, but there's a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, he worked in a lot of the same conflict zones, which obviously were if you're talking about the same period of time, those were the hot zones around the world. And just like Yuri does in this movie, Victor Bout was involved in all of those, selling guns to all sides.
Victor Bout is only 56 now, which is striking to me that he's not older, because we're led to believe that Nick Cage, he looks exactly the same in the first scenes of this movie, which are supposed to take place in the early 90s, I think.
Right.
And the final scenes in this movie, which are supposed to take place in the mid-aughts. So I just assumed Victor Bout would be 70 by now. Although I don't know how old Nick Cage is. He just looks old. He's looked the same for 30 years.
That's funny that you bring that up. I think actually the first scenes in the movie are around 82 or something.
Holy shit. Oh yeah, when he's in Brighton Beach, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, they dress him a little differently. Maybe his hair is
He's got some thicker hair. Yeah, his hair is longer. I think his hairline's probably fixed up a little bit.
But it's pretty subtle. But that kind of goes with my feeling about this character. He's a little bit of a cartoon character. He's a little bit broadly drawn and not all that grounded, despite the actual specifics of his history and his life that they get into. He's this cutout that floats along and narrates the story has these mile markers of what year it is, but it kind of happens out of time at the same time.
I think that's a fair point. And my opinion about when the movie works best is when he's playing off people that feel less cartoonish, even if they're maybe cartoonish in their mannerisms and the way they carry themselves. There's real world consequences to the things they do. And I think that grounds the movie.
Yes.
But when it's just like Yuri and his exploits with nameless people buying his weapons, it feels like just a series of vignettes of him making a bunch of money.
No, I had that feeling too. The movie floats and then comes down to the ground for a minute and then it pops back up in the air like a balloon. And it is some of the other characters and some of the good actors that he gets to bounce off of when the movie comes together. And then I'm feeling it more. And then it floats away again on me to get get metaphorical. But before we leave this section, because you talked about the box office, I have a straight ahead theory about what went wrong with this movie and its box office. If you want to hear
let's
that
hear
right now.
Absolutely.
This should have been a $35 million movie and then they would have made a little profit.
Do you see $50 million on screen here? I don't.
No, I think it's like you also mentioned they traveled all over. I'm like, I noticed that like establishing shot in Colombia that looks, or Bolivia, or wherever they are doing this cocaine for guns deal. Looks amazing. Beautiful setup. We didn't need it. It's not that big a deal. I was even thinking scenes that I realized later were probably shot in South Africa. I was like, is that Southern California desert? Is that Arizona? They could have swapped that on me and saved a few $1 million here and there. Although, you know, we also hear about how South Africa is sometimes a cheaper place to shoot because they have a lot of incentives for filmmakers.
The Empty Man, yeah.
But still, like somewhere in this budget, it got out of hand. And the scope of the movie, it doesn't feel like it needed to be that expensive because like it didn't fail at the box office. It just couldn't keep up with what it had spent.
You bring up a good point. There's a lot of these shots of duffel bags of money and like cases of guns being exchanged on like folding tables in the middle of the desert or the middle of the jungle. It's like you could have just put them in a room somewhere and saved a bunch of money. Certainly appreciate the extra effort that you went through, but I have a hard time believing that's how those deals went down. Like they probably went down in warehouses or like empty airplane hangars.
Even that's like the Hollywood version of it.
The one thing I'll give War Dogs credit for is that it made arms dealing look way more mundane and like it just happened in strip malls.
Yeah, you know? Exactly. We got to give it a nod for that.
Except for the Triangle of Death. But yeah, let's start going through the story and we can pick apart our problems with it.
All right.
Or our praise for it too. It's not all
Sure.
bad. I still like this movie.
Jumping in. Yuri Orlov, played by Nicolas Cage, was born in Odessa, Ukraine, but he grew up in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. Is that how you say that? I meant to ask you before we started. Would you say Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, the way you say Jamaica, Queens or something?
Brooklyn neighborhoods don't usually get the Brooklyn like capper.
Okay.
Like no one says like Williamsburg, Brooklyn or Greenpoint,
I was wondering.
Brooklyn.
I wasn't sure.
And only certain neighborhoods in Queens get it. It's a weird thing. Like no one says Astoria, Queens, but they'll say like Flushing, Queens. It's strange.
Okay.
I can't explain it.
All
One
right.
of those things.
That's a fun side convo. Well, probably cut it right out, but maybe I'll just say he grew up in Brighton.
I say keep it in. People will appreciate that.
Okay. As a young man in the 1980s, Yuri sees an opportunity to sell guns to the organized criminals in his neighborhood. And he brings his little brother, Vitaly, played by Jared Leto, into business with him. Then Yuri branches out, starts selling guns internationally. While accompanying one shipment to Colombia, Yuri is forced to think fast and paint a new name on the tail of his cargo ship to avoid being nabbed by an aggressive Interpol agent named Jack Valentine, played by Ethan Hawke. After a Colombian customer pays for his guns with kilos of cocaine, Vitaly immediately turns into an out-of-control coke addict. Yuri is forced to check his brother into rehab and continue the business on his own. Meanwhile, Yuri is obsessed with a fashion model named Ava Fontaine, played by Bridget Moynihan, so he concocts a harebrained scheme that involves renting out an entire hotel and luring Ava there with a phony modeling gig. It works perfectly, and soon they're married.
Seems a little easy, a little convenient, but we'll get to that in time. You have a note here about the intro. The intro for this movie is probably the most famous thing about it. People will often say like, I don't remember much about that movie, but the intro was really cool. Most reviews you'll read of this movie will single it out because it is like, it's well thought out and well done. It illustrates the movie's point, almost to the point where like, did we need the movie? Could you have just made this into a short film? It gets the whole thing.
It's striking. Maybe that's again where some of the budget went, because it starts off with a talking to the cameras thing, which a lot of this movie is about this character, Yuri, teaching you the arms business. He's in this stylized war zone and the ground is covered in empty shell casings and he makes a little point. And then it goes into the title sequence, and the title sequence has some CGI animation where you are a bullet and you come to life and you follow yourself through a factory and then overseas and then eventually into the head of a juvenile combatant in a war zone in the far-flung parts of the world. And it's fascinating and dark and cool.
I could have done without the Yuri talking into the camera intro. I feel like this is such a more interesting way to start the movie without that. Because what does that little monologue he gives really add? He's like, oh, you know, what he's saying that however many people in the world own a gun and he wants to arm the rest of them. It's like, yeah, we get it, man. You sell guns. You want to sell more of them. It's not profound.
It's cheeky, but that's kind of my problem with the whole Yuri character is that he's not profound. He's a little surface, and it's like they want him to make snarky comments about the business he's in, and eventually they want him to reckon with it. But the snark tone is what stuck with me, maybe in part because it leads off with it the first 15 seconds.
I think that's fair. He's not like a fully drawn character. And I did find Cage's voiceover performance to be pretty bad. I feel like his acting in the movie is good, but his voiceover is not. He's pretty monotone and he sounds tired and bored throughout. And I don't know if when Nick Cage is giving kind of a lifeless performance, it feels like it has to be a choice because that's just so against his natural instincts. But I wonder why they decided to go that route and have it such a low energy voiceover.
I would think the same thing, that it is a choice. Again, I try to reconcile that with this characterization. Who is this guy? He's in this business because he thinks it's kind of neat, but he's also not that hyped about it. You could see a version where Nick Cage is a guy who just fucking loves guns so much, like he gets all Nick Cage wired and hyped up to tell you about them. But he's kind of chill, like you said, when he's telling you about them.
You know, you had a big question about this movie, and did you want to bring it up here?
If you're ready, because this is make or break of the movie for me. Just to preface this, I like the movie fine, and I like it better as it goes on. It is something that we probably should reckon with. I'm like, is this guy who leads us through the whole movie, not only is the focus of the story, but he literally talks to us directly, he talks to camera or on voiceover for most of the movie. Is he supposed to be a hero or is he an anti-hero?
He's definitely the protagonist,
Yeah.
But I wouldn't strongly hesitate to call him a hero. I think he's firmly in anti-hero territory. He really takes almost no moral stance on anything for the entire movie. Just about everything he does is either underhanded or at best like morally ambiguous, you know? Like,
yeah, he ends up compromising everything, not just creating suffering for others, but enduring suffering for himself, for his family. Like, he sacrifices everything, and that should be poignant, but I ended up wondering why he did it. So I feel like a good anti-hero, and everybody uses Walter White as the best example that we've seen in modern storytelling.
although I would say he veers into outright villain territory towards the end.
That's true. He does. Maybe season one is like when you're still like, this is really good anti-hero. And obviously, Tony Soprano's the other big case that people bring up is there's something that you empathize with. You never sympathize with their specific goals, with their means of achieving their goals, but you have to sort of empathize with their feelings about life, what they care about. You can admire their passion, you can admire their skill, and you can empathize with what they want out of life and what they feel life has done to them and why they do the things they do. And this character, the anti part is there, but like, I found it really hard to find the stuff that I was like, you got to hand it to him kind of stuff, you know? I'm not sure what you got to hand it to Yuri Orlov over.
Under no circumstances do you gotta hand it to him, to reference the famous drill tweet. But think about the things he does throughout the movie. He starts selling guns. Why? Because he can, and it seems like easy money.
Yeah.
He wants to marry this supermodel, so he concocts a scheme to trap her, almost.
Yeah.
I mean, he does. No, he does. It's not even that he books the hotel. He also books the gig.
Yeah, he creates the fake gig where she's hired and she gets there and is like, I don't know, the gig fell apart. Something happened. And he keeps up this lie. It gets silly there. But yeah, like you said, from early on, I think it lost me the moment he saw guns. He sees like this attempted hit go down in his Brighton Beach neighborhood. And he goes, ooh, guns. I'm going to be the gun guy. And like, no one told him guns are not a personality, but this guy made guns his personality.
And yeah, he doesn't even seem to like particularly like them.
Or like, there's all these signs. He knows a lot about him. He spends a lot of the movie like telling us about the situation and bragging about how good he is at getting the guns and selling the guns, which is like, okay, as a character, he's got some skills, he's got some talent for this, but I don't know, it's so thin.
He's just a logistics guy, which like every company has one of those.
And it's mostly like him telling us about it, right? If we saw him do something and go, oh no, I get it. Look how he handled that situation. And the first kind of situation like that is painting the name on the boat. That's where they finally like, we better show not tell for a minute here, because he's been telling for a long time. And finally he has to actually take some action and tell guys to paint the name on the boat.
The Kono. It's terrible luck to change a boat's name mid-journey, or I think ever. I'm not sure the rule is.
Yeah, I forgot that. There is some superstitions about naming boats.
Whatever the bad thing is, they do it.
Okay.
Because whether it's changing it mid-journey or just changing it at all, they do them both. So those scenes are fun because who's he getting one over on? Interpol? I don't care about Interpol.
Yeah.
But then like later on when he's like, oh, I managed to smuggle these guns into Sierra Leone, so now a bunch of kids can get shot. Then you're like, well, now it's hard for me to root for you.
What you were saying about Interpol, we don't really care about Interpol, but we do care about Ethan Hawke. He's one of the fun parts of this movie, right?
He's really good in it. And he's worked with Andrew Niccol quite a bit. He made a good like drone strike movie.
Okay.
Andrew Niccol, this guy will latch onto an idea and he'll make a movie that's got like a message. He's a big message guy. He doesn't like drones. So Ethan Hawke made a movie with him about how drones are bad. And it's pretty good. It's called First Kill. But yeah, like Hawke is just all Boy Scout intensity and barely contained bureaucratic fury, which is like a very good look for him. He's really good at that. So it's always a blast when he comes on screen. And he's not in this movie a lot. He's more like a specter that kind of hangs over it.
Yeah.
Which is a solid use of. They do that with a good amount of the supporting characters. They pop in for a scene and then they disappear for a chunk. And ordinarily, I feel like that would disrupt the pacing. But here, it fits more with the vignette style pacing that this movie has.
I definitely agree that that's a plus for it. His terrible buzz cut haircut is part of why he works so well. And his stupid, what do you call this jackets? Nylon windbreakers.
Oh, the windbreakers.
Wear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's windbreakers with Interpol stamped on the back.
Yeah.
I've always been confused about how Interpol gets like their jurisdiction. I've never really understood their role in global law enforcement.
I totally don't know what the reality is, but I suspect suspected during the whole movie that what was going on in the movie was not real. Like, I think Interpol is just a coordination thing, but it's individual police departments in different
more like a
countries,
database
right?
type of thing.
Yeah. Like, you don't get a job. You're not like, I'm on the Interpol SWAT team. I thought it was just like a way for police departments to coordinate. Maybe there's some staff, but maybe I'm wrong. I just thought it seemed phony that this like very American young man would be in charge of going around the globe, but not on behalf of any American institution. Just, I work for Interpol and I'm here to nab your guns.
Right. Like, why can you arrest people in Africa and also the Colombian waters?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand how that works, but
We don't.
the movie doesn't try to explain it either.
No.
I probably could have done my own research and looked into it, but no, I'm just deciding to be ignorant about this.
We're better off not knowing. We got other
Hopefully.
things to contend with here.
If I have to do extensive research into Interpol's jurisdiction, like my life has gone in a weird direction that I'm not comfortable with. So better off this way. Well, let's talk about Leto a little bit, because I think if you listen to Morbius, I'm not a fan of his as an actor or a person. He seems like a bad dude.
I would agree with that.
And he's shockingly bad in this movie. His character is also shockingly bad.
Yes.
Like, it's poorly written, poorly thought out, poorly acted. But every time Vitali's on screen, I feel like the movie takes a dive in quality.
Yeah, like I was complaining about Yuri, the big brother, being the thin character, and this other character is just a couple character traits, and he has almost nothing going for him.
Yeah, he likes sex and cocaine and doesn't like guns. He's not a gun guy.
But he's willing to go along with the guns for a while. I think Leto's probably given some good performances in his career. This is not one of them. And then he gets worse, because it starts off as just this goofy brother, and then they do that deal that we talked about where they get paid in cocaine instead of money. That was silly to start with. Let me just say, this is an example of how they're stretching the Yuri character's morality and dedication to this business. His customer fucking shoots him in the liver, right? And he closes the deal anyway, and he accepts the cocaine as payment. So right away, it's okay, this is cartoonishly ridiculous here.
I would have asked for more cocaine. I was like, you shot me. The price just went up 30%.
And he's like, okay, you got a deal. We're leaving now. They get in a cab or the car, and then they immediately crack open a kilo of cocaine just to try it out.
Because when you have a gunshot wound, what you want to do is just speed up your heart rate a ton by doing a bunch of blow. It just doesn't seem like good medical advice.
And poor Vitali, he's from the walk hard school of cocaine addiction, which is,
You don't want no part of this shit, Yuri.
he takes one sniff of the stuff and he just turns into a silly goose who loves cocaine. Is that what cocaine addiction is? I don't really know that much about it.
Yeah, sadly, we're not the people who can speak on this with any authority, but something tells me it's a little more gradual, a little more nuanced than the portrayal of coke addiction we get in Lord of War.
And like also a little darker. Vitali, they set him up to be this kind of sad, pathetic character that's a drain on his older brother's spirit, because he leads him into this life where he becomes a coke addict and he lives this fucked up life. But then when they put it on screen, it's all kind of silly. It's all like him going, please, can I have one more cocaine before I go to rehab? And his brother's like, okay. And it's like he's throwing a treat to a dog. Like he puts it
on the car seat like a dog, like you would give a dog something.
Yeah, you give him a treat. And he sniffs it up and he goes, thank you, brother. Thank you. I love cocaine. And it's like, this is a silly depiction. I don't know that much, but it seems silly.
I've never partaken, but I've been around people who were on cocaine or habitually partook in it, and they're just like themselves, but have a little more energy.
Yeah.
And they keep trying to pitch you a screenplay. But
And like it didn't connect for me. So my other point about Vitali's role here is that he didn't have much personality coming in. And then he goes on this bender that becomes a problem for Yuri. But yes, it's his brother and he's now a coke addict, but it could have been anything else. It could have been like an angry boss yelling at him and he had to like figure out how to sneak past the boss without getting in trouble, or like a barking dog. It was like, there was no like real connection of, oh, my brother's fucked up. It was like, oh, I got to give the guard dog a steak so that he likes me and I can sneak off to my next mission.
is that the intro to Clue?
Yeah, it was that too.
No argument here. We're aligned on our feelings about this character and this portion of the movie, but we can't move on to the middle section of the movie without talking about Ava
Yeah.
a little bit. Another not quite a character. Originally supposed to be Monica Bellucci. I think that would have been an interesting performance.
Yeah.
She doesn't play like these kind of shrinking violet characters very often. But yeah, Ava's just like is it okay to say dumbass?
You mean just because she fell for a dumbass scheme?
And also just like went along with it for 15 years before realizing like something was up.
We complained about in the War Dogs episode about David Packhouse's fictional wife or girlfriend is, played by Ana de Armas, being a cutout character, just a cheap obstacle, just a beautiful obstacle. I feel like Ava is a little more than that. They give her a little more personality, but not much. It's a matter of degree.
She feels like a character that had an arc, but we met her at the end of it. Does that make sense? Because like she's saying, I'm not a big star anymore. I'm trying to get into acting, but nobody will hire me because I'm not very good at it. It feels like if we were watching a movie about her, like when she would meet Yuri towards the sad ending of the movie.
But that's a good point. At least she had a thing that she did. Did Iz even have a job or an aspiration or anything?
She sat on the couch and looked beautiful.
And Ava, poor Ava, this scheme is so kooky. Like we talk about where the movie gets cartoony. And I was like, wait a minute, is this a comedy with the silly, hapless rich guy who like, because I thought it would backfire on him. The scheme is so dumb. He buys out a hotel. He lures her to it with a fake job offer. Who knows who he got to call her, or did he call her himself and go, oh, Miss Ava, we've got a modeling job for you. They didn't.
Ava, we have a modeling job. No, sorry. That was
They spared us that part. But then she gets there. I think maybe we have to point back at Yuri because she's won over. She falls in love with him during this weekend where they're trapped at the hotel together. And that makes her look bad. That makes her look dumb. Mm-hmm. But the problem, I think, is that they didn't write Yuri to be charming enough. They wrote him more dopey. And so, like, if you fall for the dopey guy's dopey scheme, what are we going to think of you?
Can I give more of like a meta evaluation of why I don't think this romance works?
Absolutely.
I don't think Nicolas Cage has worked as a romantic actor since like Wild at Heart, which was what, like 91? Or like Red Rocks, what was that movie? Red Rock West. So that was 93 and Wild at Heart was 91. I just think he's like too weird and his performances are always too keyed up, have too much coke energy. I don't see him as a romantic entity. So anytime he's carrying on with an actress on screen like post 1995, I'm just like, I don't buy it.
No, that's a good point. That underlies everything else. Whatever was in the script, whatever he tried in his performance, that does hang over him.
And I wonder if I don't think I've ever verbalized this, but it's like a truth I've known in my heart for a long time that I just don't buy Nicolas Cage as a romantic leading man.
It's always nice when you can get out the deepest truths of your heart on this podcast.
This has been weighing me down for many years. But yeah, it makes me kind of hate Ava that she fell for this. And it's also like super creepy behavior from Yuri that like once again is being presented as like cute.
It's played off as cute and funny and he's rewarded for it. And that would all be fine in a lighthearted romantic comedy, but in the context of how serious things get in this movie.
Yeah, if you go 5 minutes in either direction, we're seeing children get shot in the head. So it feels a little inappropriate. All right, do you want me to walk through the middle of the movie?
Yeah, let's hear what happens next.
Now it's the 1990s and the Soviet Union has just dissolved. Oh my God, you were right. This movie starts way earlier than I thought. Because the Soviet Union dissolved in 91.
Yep.
And then, wow. Now it's the 1990s and the Soviet Union has just dissolved. Yuri immediately jumps on the opportunity by connecting with his Ukrainian uncle Dmitry, an army general, and going into business selling off the huge stockpile of former Soviet armaments. They make a lot of money and they successfully frustrate Agent Valentine, who keeps trying to catch them breaking the law. Dmitry is very loyal to his nephew, rejecting all advances from a rival arms dealer named Simeon Weiss, played by Eamonn Holm, until Simeon gets fed up and has Dmitry killed with a car bomb. Then Yuri forms a relationship with the dictator of Liberia, Andre Baptiste Sr., played by Eamonn Walker, and he helps equip Baptiste's army of child soldiers. Once again, Agent Valentine chases after Yuri, this time on a cargo plane full of guns heading for Sierra Leone. But once again, Yuri manages to hide the evidence before Valentine catches up to him. Then things take a darker turn when Baptiste catches Simeon Weiss doing business in Liberia, selling guns to the dictator's enemies. Baptiste forces Yuri to participate in killing Simeon with a bullet to the head. After this, Yuri goes on a bender, and in his drug-fueled visions, he wrestles with some of the atrocities he's been a part of.
There you go. Silly rom-com schemes, and then...
This is a dark portion of the movie, yeah.
Child soldiers shooting Ian Holm in the head. There's some rough stuff in this.
Shot Bilbo. Uncle Dmitry getting blown up. Uncle Dmitry was like the friendly... He was just like a lovable old coot.
Yeah, he was funny.
He had a car that he loved, and he was like, even your business rival was admiring my car. I was like, don't get in that car, you fucking
I know.
idiot.
I knew it was definitely a setup. You could see it coming a little ways away, but it was a good moment.
It was. And it gave us a little bit of something to root for as far as like Simeon's downfall, because up until that point, I feel like everything he's been saying to Cage is like, I kind of agree with him. Like, I don't just sell to anybody. You know, I try to pick a side that makes sense for the world and is maybe not the one committing atrocities.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know, Andre Baptiste Sr. is very closely based on Charles Taylor, the president of Liberia. And if you want to know what kind of atrocities were going down, I will not get too into it on this podcast, but just a quick Google search and you'll have nightmares for weeks.
It's some real horrible stuff. And they don't dodge that.
No.
They show you that stuff. But before we leave Simeon, Ian Holm's character, who's another bright spot in the movie, is another character like Valentine who tags along and trails Yuri throughout his career. And we actually met him in the first act.
Yeah, he just brushes Yuri off at an arms show.
And then at some point, they have this dinner scene where they sit down and talk. I forgot where that was now, but I was like, whoa, this movie just got good and it got serious. And I felt like Cage brought his game up for this scene where he bounces off Ian Holm. And that was some of the best drama in the movie. movie.
That's after the arms show, but before Dimitri gets blown up. I'm not sure what section we would technically put it in. But yeah, Simeon basically now is a little humbled and trying to strike a deal with Yuri. But Yuri, remembering how he was slighted, basically tells him to kick rocks. And that has consequences, as we see.
For Dimitri mostly, and then eventually.
And for Simeon himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of Andre Baptiste, I do have to say, like, when every time the movie is dealing with Baptiste Sr., the energy level goes up and I'm just glued to the screen. I'm a big fan of Eamonn Walker from Oz.
Okay.
Really, really good on that show. And I knew him from this movie, obviously, for a long time. And I always sought out his work because I thought he was so good in this movie. Because he makes Baptiste weirdly likable. And that's such a strange thing to say for a guy I just said, if you read of the stuff he did, would give you nightmares. But he comes across as strangely reasonable at times, but also like just a live wire. He brings an air of unpredictability to the movie. That's not just like his son has that real wild man energy that is like, okay, like when this guy's on screen, I know someone's going to get shot or like killed in a horrible way. But with Baptiste Sr., you don't really know which way it's going to go. And that kind of gets you on the edge of your seat more.
I agree with you. I feel like that character works and his humorous side can be entertaining and charming, but the scary stuff that's lurking beneath still comes through. So that's the kind of anti-hero thing that I think works. You know, like that character kind of clicked for me in contrast to Yuri, who's like too chummy with him. Like we know that the laughs are surface level and you have to laugh when the dictator makes a joke, but Yuri gets too into it. Like in a scene after we were introduced to the child soldiers that Baptiste is buying the guns in order to equip, Yuri gets more chummy with him. He gives him his nickname. He starts calling him Andy. He starts getting real friendly in ways that like, I felt like Yuri's character was letting Baptiste off the hook for stuff that we knew was very wrong.
You could chalk that up to him just being terrified of him and not wanting to piss him off in any way.
Yeah.
And I mean, we also have to give Baptiste credit for the name of the movie because he has this funny verbal affectation where he says things, instead of saying bloodbath, he says bath of blood.
Yes.
Instead of saying warlord, he says lord of war. And then when people correct him, he goes, thank you, but I prefer it my way. Which is cute. Like it's kind of charming, even though the things he's saying are horrifying. So that's where the title Lord of War comes from.
That was fun. This is definitely the heart of the movie. And this is where the movie then takes a turn. While this stuff is going, Valentine catches up with Yuri again. This is in the middle of the Liberia chapter. And Valentine, again, it's another sort of hijinks scene. Yuri makes a close escape by his cleverness. He lands the plane on a dirt road and opens it up and asks the locals to help themselves to the guns. So their guns are all gone by the time that Valentine shows up. You pointed out there may be some issues with the way that was portrayed.
The guns thing, I get, because, you know, guns are worth money and this is a poor part of the world. So even if you're not looking for a gun to go shoot somebody, you could probably sell it for some decent money. But then they stripped the plane of all the scrap metal and you know, like it feels a little much.
I felt uncomfortable with that too, seeing these people that seem to be just heading down this main road from where they live in the country to some town or something. I guess they're on their way to a fairly major city when they were forced to land. But it felt like maybe the director, and I don't want to say the director didn't understand because he wrote the movie, but to show this in a gritty, realistic way, if you land a valuable object in a war-torn country, there will probably be some local gangsters, right? Somebody who's going to come out and claim that stuff.
Much like the recent movie Plane, starring Gerard Butler.
Exactly. Somebody bad is going to show up and say, everybody back off. This stuff is mine. I'm taking this plane apart. Whatever. You can do all that stuff, but you want to show the local, whatever level of gangsterism is going on there doing that. But what they show is like the most innocent looking women and children joyously running into a plane and picking up grenades and AK-47s and running out smiling. And it feels like an uncomfortable reduction of these people.
Yes, that was put more eloquently than I could in my notes. But yeah, something did feel off about it.
But also a part of the movie that they clearly spent a lot of money on. This kind of looks like it really was shot in Africa. And they do this time lapse with a full-size plane being stripped down over the course of the night. And it was kind of cool just visually as a scene.
I mean, also the Valentine and Yuri interaction is great in this scene because Valentine is really like taking Yuri to task for the first time and you agree with him.
He finally says out loud what we've been suspecting this whole time, that what Yuri's doing is really indefensible. The stuff that he's helping make happen is truly horrendous. And yet Yuri laughs him off again. So it kind of indicts us. Like, are we supposed to be laughing with Yuri? Is he still our guy? Because he shakes it off and keeps smiling.
I don't think we're supposed to be laughing it off with him. I don't think that's what the director intended. But then again, if we have to ask, they didn't do a good enough job of spelling it out. Let's see. What else?
So this sequence culminates when Simeon shows up in Liberia. And then it does get serious. This is the one part where all of a sudden Yuri can't laugh it off.
Yeah, he's basically forced to shoot Simeon with Baptiste. Like they hold the gun together and pull the trigger together. He's not even looking, but Baptiste makes a point to tell him, you could stop this at any time. And he doesn't. That was a nice little little moment to show that underneath all his bravado and the way he laughs off these things, that he does want revenge and vengeance on Simeon, which is not really like a characteristic we would associate with Yuri. He very rarely gets angry.
I felt like he didn't want to. Do you feel like he wanted to take revenge on Simeon? Or did you think that when Baptiste was telling him you can stop it, it means you have to give up your arms business? It's like you're either all in or all out. That's kind of how I took it.
Oh, I didn't interpret it that way. I just thought Baptiste was saying, like, I won't make you shoot him if you forcibly remove your hand.
I found that scene dark and disturbing, but also slightly confusing. So this is definitely open to interpretation, what was going on there and what was going through Yuri's head. And that's partly because he hasn't thought about this stuff the rest of the movie. That's where I felt like, okay, you guys, this is a little bit too little too late. He's starting to have to face what he's been involved with. But this is happening 3/4 of the way through or something like that, 2/3 at least. After this, he goes on this drug bender and he has these crazy psychedelic dreams. It does seem like he's struggling with what his life has been about. But I'm like, oh, you kind of let us down the other way for most of the movie. I'm not sure I believe that this character is actually worried about this stuff now.
He goes on a drug bender, but we should specify which drug he's on the bender of, because he's on brown.
Brown. Just learned about that.
Which you have a note in here saying, is brown a real thing? And it is.
Oh, okay.
I know I'd read a book about the conflict in Sierra Leone, and it's mentioned in there. It's also mentioned in the book and movie Beasts of No Nation.
Okay.
It is a mixture of cocaine or amphetamine and gunpowder, according to Wikipedia. Because I was like, well, fuck, wouldn't you just get a better high from just cocaine?
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Apparently, the nitroglycerine in the gunpowder helps it move through your system faster and produces a more intense high.
Oh, wild. So it's real.
It causes vasodilation.
It's not just, I thought it was just symbolic.
It's possible it started that way because it feels like a thing that would, especially because the bartender who pressures him to do it says, like, almost in a symbolic way, these are your bullets. You should snort the gunpowder out.
Yes.
And, but I think it probably started like that. And then people realized it gives them a crazy high. Then...
this dumb stunt is actually fun. Yeah. I was picturing like the Fury Road guys huffing the chrome. It's like a tribute to what their lives are about. In their case, vehicles, and in this case, guns. But I guess brown is a thing.
Listeners, if you go out and try some brown and let us know how it is,
No,
if it's fun.
Please don't. I don't think
please don't do that. No, we do not endorse brown. All right. Do you want to walk us through the end of the movie?
Okay, let's bring it home. Agent Valentine confronts Ava and informs her that her husband is an arms dealer, a fact that Yuri has kept secret from her all this time. Ava forces Yuri to quit the arms business, and for a while he goes straight, selling off the natural resources of developing countries instead of selling guns. But one day Baptiste shows up in New York and offers Yuri an irresistible payday of blood diamonds to take on one last arms deal. Yuri convinces Vitaly to come with him to Sierra Leone to watch his back. During the deal, Vitaly sees that the guns are going to be used to massacre a camp full of women and children, and he becomes very upset. Vitaly pulls a grenade and blows up one of the 2 trucks full of guns, and then he's shot dead by the soldiers. But Yuri stops his dying brother from blowing up the other truck, and he completes the deal for the remaining guns. Then Yuri heads home with half the diamonds and his dead brother's body, and he's immediately arrested by Agent Valentine. Due to his betrayal of Ava and his role in the death of his brother, Yuri's wife leaves him, and his mother disowns him. And while Yuri was away, Ava discovered his secret office and led Interpol to seize all the evidence of his illegal arms operation. But one more time, Agent Valentine is foiled as a shadowy U.S. Army officer shows up and tells him Yuri must be let go. The highest levels of the U.S. government want Yuri free to do his business, and so he returns to work as the Lord of War.
I did like how you phrased that in your section here. He goes straight selling off the natural resources of developing countries instead of guns. When you put it that way, it doesn't sound that much more noble.
Yeah, no, and I think that's intentional that they're like, he just shifted to something ever so slightly less sleazy, but still pretty destructive to these same countries.
It raises a question, though, that I had about this movie, which is we're meant to see that he's wildly successful and wealthy from this.
Right.
But his brother is still a chef at his family's like failing fucking Brighton Beach restaurant. So like he ran with him for years and Yuri just left him out there in the cold. I guess he had addiction problems. But then like, why does Yuri even need a job at this point?
Yeah.
Is he just doing this to stay busy? Because he's complaining about the profit margins and shit. I'm like, you have no expenses anymore. Why do you need all this money?
It's a good question. There's definitely that section where Ava forces him to go straight. And I just assume that it's expensive to be rich. And so
it is is expensive to be rich. Yeah, that's a good point.
The upkeep on their Manhattan mansions and stuff is enough that he's got to keep bringing in cash.
That's fair. You could probably cut this, honestly. This was a stupid line of thing to go down.
But no, there is a problem with the deal, too. None of the economics totally makes sense because the whole thing is pitched as the one big score. It's a classic movie trope of like, last big score, you can't resist it. And he shows him the biggest diamond you ever saw. This is what you're getting paid with. And then they go and do the deal, and it's 2 little trucks. He's like, oh, it's 500 guns and a few hundred grenades. It's like, wait, you were selling Soviet attack helicopters and tanks in an earlier part of your career, and now like 500 guns is the biggest job you've ever taken?
I guess they do set it up because Baptiste says how much difficulty they're having getting guns into the region because of pressure from UN. They were paying a premium because they were under a microscope.
It wasn't the quantity, it was the degree of difficulty, and only Yuri could pull that off.
Yeah, exactly. So the movie does try to explain that to some degree.
All right.
But yeah, that stack of diamonds has got to be it's $30 million in diamonds, I think.
They're all like giant thumb-sized diamonds, too.
Yeah, they're like golf balls. It's insane.
Silly diamonds.
But Sierra Leone, that's where a lot of them come from. So it's probably the one thing they have in abundance. So this section of the movie is more just like Yuri's life coming undone slowly. But he never really, and you have a note about this, like it never really seems to bother him all that much.
This is where, again, like Ava, we talked about being a little bit of a thin character. She kind of redeems herself in this section. She gets to be a real person and have real feelings and say things that show that she has values and deals with the world in a real way. And then Yuri, like they have this big showdown. Yuri argues back at her and he's trying to tell her these lines. I'm only selling a means for people to defend themselves and everything I do is legal. And I had this feeling in my head, like, I wish I believed that Yuri didn't believe what he was saying. Like in a good version of this big fight between the husband and wife, he's trying to bullshit her and he knows he's lying and she knows he's lying and he's still trying these lines. And that's the subtext and the irony of that. Like, you can't come clean with the truth. But because of the way they characterize Yuri through the rest of the movie, I kind of like, no, he probably still believes this about himself. He's kind of shallow. His view of the world has been frivolous this whole time. And so instead of being like a fight that was rich with irony, it was just this flat surface level argument. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I think my kind of grand feeling about this movie can be summed up in saying like, it's a good movie. It's maybe a really good movie, but it could be a great movie if Yuri was a more thoughtfully drawn character.
Yeah.
And that's the one big thing holding it back.
And I don't want to totally dump on it because by the end, because it starts to reckon with the morality, even though I think it still stumbles, it's much more gripping. It's much more interesting when shit gets real and like the fights with Ava are real. And there is one moment shortly after that where Ava is like leaving him, but she's telling him, I'll see you tomorrow or something. There is a scene that does what I wanted the other scene to do, where she lies to him. He knows it. She knows it. And they keep up the facade. I'm like, oh yes, now there's subtext. Now there is heightened dramatic irony going on in the scene. I'm like, I just wish there would have been more of that.
Yeah, but everything like Yuri grapples with comes from external forces. It's people telling him things about himself. He never has to sit there and be like, is that true? Am I that person?
That's
like
true.
It just rolls off his shoulders.
Yeah, wouldn't have been that many more scenes to give him that extra dimension where he actually dealt with stuff. But the only time he deals with it is when he's high on Brown and seeing ghosts in his dream.
And seeing real people with missing limbs and stuff because of the weapons he sold.
Yeah.
But then he does get one line worthy of introspection towards the end of the movie here, which you singled out, which is the Walter White line, to bring it back around to Breaking Bad, where he says, it's not about the money, I'm good at it. And that's about as much introspection as we get from Yuri.
That's true. He finally admits to something, like he just wanted to succeed. And it's like a big bomb line, and I liked it, but I'm like, you could have played that the whole time. You could have shown some signs that he loved this and he hated it and loved the money, but he didn't care about money. Like, those are nice clashes within the character that he could have wrestled with in each of these chapters, but he doesn't. They just save it up. They make him unself-conscious and not introspective until the end, and then he just drops it as a single line on you. But I was like, not enough.
Can we talk about Vitaly and his involvement in this one big final deal? Like, why is Yuri still going to him for help with these things? Like, he doesn't seem to actually do anything helpful at any moment.
No.
All he does is cause trouble, and in this case, get himself killed.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you need him to have your back? You have Baptiste Jr., who's like insane, clearly, but also seems to like Yuri. He probably is not just going to kill him for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, he'll probably try to help you get out of the deal alive because, you know, you're a cash cow for him too. You get him his gun.
That's true. They let Yuri genuinely win over Baptiste Jr. You thought he was going to be a guy that would always turn on you and kill you, but by the end, he's actually made a friend.
Yeah, because he gets him the gun of Rambo.
Yeah, exactly. The gun of Rambo is another funny running bit in the movie, which you mentioned. It is one of those bits that sticks with you, and it was in the trailer, and it's the fun side of the movie. But yeah, the reasoning that Yuri gives, he's like, I don't trust any of these guys. I need family with me.
Why would you trust Vitaly at this point, though? He's a fuck up.
He's He's done nothing but fuck up, yeah. Except for now, like he's actually, I mean, it's all pretty telegraphed drama. He goes to him, he's like, hey, brother, I've finally got my life together. I'm not a silly goose coke fiend anymore. Aren't you happy for me? He's like, no, I need you to destroy yourself. Come along with me.
And Yuri has no second thoughts about it either. This man is very self-involved, to put it lightly. Like he does not care about whose life he ruins in the process of making some money.
Like even the way that we summarized it, it's supposed to be incredibly poignant. When his brother's been shot, he takes the other grenade out of his hand before he can blow up the second truck because he's got to save the deal, right? The deal is bigger even than his brother's life. His brother finally had a realization that human life is more important than this stupid business. And Yuri's like, no, I need you to give me that other grenade as you exhale your last breath because I've got to salvage half of this deal.
I also love how the warlord literally just divides the diamonds in half with a machete. Like he doesn't weigh them to make sure.
Right.
Like he could have given Yuri like a couple $1 million extra or not enough.
True. Pretty blasé with the gigantic diamonds over there.
Sheesh. The reveal of Yuri's office, I guess you'd call it, was another fun moment. We've seen it, but when Ava finds it,
she finds his office. She guesses the combination lock. But it's funny because you see this office early on. It's a storage container in kind of an empty lot under a bridge, as supposedly is somewhere in Brooklyn.
You can't just put storage containers in empty lots. And first of all, there are no like empty lots in Brooklyn. They're all like staging for construction equipment and shit now.
Meanwhile, this is 20 years later. He's now like got $1 billion business and his whole office is still in this unguarded empty lot. There's not even like a fence around this lot. And all there is a single padlock, which anybody could like.
With his son's birthday as the lock, which like that's publicly available information.
That's true. I was just thinking about somebody could hit it with a rock and get in there and steal all the guns and everything.
But if anybody knew him even a little, that'd probably be like the fourth number they'd guess.
Doesn't take her long to figure it out.
And she's not the smartest.
Sorry, Ava. We don't think a lot of you.
You're better than Yuri, but probably not smarter. But then we do get a scene that I love, which is the Yuri and Valentine final showdown, where Yuri basically tells Valentine how it's going to go. Get it all out of your system now, because in a couple hours, I'm going to walk out. And Fargo season 3 actually has a very similar scene that closes out the season. That came out after this, obviously, though. It's not the most original kind of interaction between a master criminal and an idealistic law enforcement officer.
It made me think like who originated that trope of here's what's going to happen in 2 minutes. Someone's going to knock on the door, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but it's a trope I enjoy. Like when it's well done, like it is here, it's a fun payoff.
Besides that being a fun payoff, there was something interesting about that scene because it was one in the long string of Yuri telling people the way things go. But instead of most of the movie, he's telling us about things. Here's how things are in Sierra Leone. Here's how an AK-47 works. And we're just the audience. So we're going, oh, that's interesting. Here he's doing one of his famous exposition dump monologues, except he's telling it to a character who cares incredibly deeply about what he's telling him. So it's like it's night and day, the impact of one of those scenes when it's directed at somebody because he's basically breaking Valentine's heart.
And did you catch who gets him released? Colonel Southern? Did you pick up the implication?
I got the joke when I read the credits.
It's basically Oliver North is the implication.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little nod to anyone who's familiar. There's a pretty decent Jeremy Renner movie about the journalist who uncovered all that called Kill the Messenger.
Oh, interesting.
I know Jeremy Renner's kind of like a punchline, but he was pretty good in that movie.
But he has some good movies still, yeah.
Yeah, he's not a bad actor.
Yeah. I checked in the credits because I was like, who is that? They never show the face of the character. You hear his voice once, and I'm like, wait a minute, was that Powers Booth? And then the movie ended, and I saw the credits. I was like, Donald Sutherland.
Just another gravelly voiced old guy.
Could have gone either way. But yeah, it's credited to 3 people because I guess 2 people play the guy in the scene wearing the uniform.
The silhouette.
Play the silhouette, and Donald Sutherland plays the voice. But that was another one of the fun, cheeky twists, and that kind of worked.
And he also pops up throughout the movie in these very small moments, but that was enough to lay the groundwork that Yuri's got connections in high places. And
yeah, that was well threaded through, but it's not consequential to the end. You talked about how Andrew Niccol thought of this movie or defended it as, I'm really going after the American government, and no one even wanted to fund my movie because they were scared of what the powers that be would do to them. But he only flips this switch in the last 3 minutes of the movie. And I'm like, that kind of wasn't what the movie was about. It was an ironic ending, and it's a strong point of view to put everything else that Yuri's done in a new light. But if you watch this movie, you don't go, oh, that movie really fucking skewered the U.S. government. It's just like, oh, there was a twist at the end.
Right. It doesn't let the U.S. government off the hook. It just ignores them for large chunks of it.
It's mostly just Yuri doing, like, it seems like Yuri's a one-man show, just fucking ruining the world with his gun running.
Which, that's how you get the nickname, the Merchant of Death.
I guess, yeah. He earned it.
All right. So let's talk a little about Andrew Niccol and maybe what you might know him from and what he's done since Lord of War. Pre-Lord of War, he had directed and written Gattaca, which is how he first came to work with Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Which Gattaca is a good movie. And then he wrote The Truman Show, which is another good movie. A movie that was maybe underappreciated in its time, but has become, I think people thought it was unrealistic that we would care what a normal person was doing in their everyday life. And
yeah. Little did we know.
Just a few short years later, it was all anybody wanted to watch. Then he followed that up with Simone, future episode Simone.
Oh, I vaguely remember
Which was that weird Al Pacino AI.
Al Pacino meets an AI. Yeah. That'll be fun to dig into.
Then he got a story credit for The Terminal, which The Terminal is just a hot piece of dog shit movie. I fucking hate that movie. And then he wrote and directed Lord of War. He would follow that up with In Time, which is a thriller starring Amanda Seyfried and Justin Timberlake, which is not very good, unfortunately. Do you remember that one?
Does he have a little digital readout on his forearm?
Yeah, because you can buy more life. If you have enough money, you can buy like a longer lifespan.
I don't know if I even saw it, but I can picture Justin Timberlake's arm.
Cool concept, not really fully realized. So he did that. And then he did The Host, not the good one, the Korean monster movie, not that one.
Okay.
The Stephanie Meyer adaptation. She was the Twilight writer.
Oh, I don't remember that other host.
She wrote another book called The Host, and then he directed the movie of it. I never saw it.
Okay.
Couldn't tell you if it was any good or not. And then Good Kill, which I mentioned, was the Ethan Hawke is a drone pilot movie, which is pretty good. Underrated, I would say. And then he made a movie with Clive Owen in 2018 called Anon, which I've never heard of, but it didn't get great reviews. And he hasn't done anything since. It's 5 years now.
Oh.
I wonder what he's up to. Andrew, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He's still pretty young. Does he have anything upcoming? Let me see. He's writing the Monopoly movie, apparently.
Oh, whoa, interesting gig.
Is it going to be live action? That's weird.
That sounds like that movie is going to light up Twitter when it gets closer to being done.
It says it's due out in 2027.
I guess we're going to have to wait.
Why is it even on anyone's radar then? So good for him. He's still working. It's probably a decent payday attached to the Monopoly movie, but up and down career for sure. But he's got some good stuff in there.
Yeah, he's still collecting his $200.
So the Simeon Vice character was also based on a real guy, Sarkis Sauganalian. The Justice Department charged him for conspiring of shipping unauthorized weapons to Iraq, where he was found guilty and sentenced to jail. But he was released several years later when he helped the Clinton administration unsuccessfully break up a counterfeiting ring in Lebanon. And then in 2001, he was arrested again by the U.S. government on bank fraud charges, but was released a year later after he revealed that the charges in question were arms deals between the CIA and Peru.
Oh.
Which is...
He had the goods on the CIA, and wow.
Pretty interesting. But he has since passed, probably of old age. And Jack Valentine, apparently based on a real guy, Tom Pasquarello, who was a DEA agent.
I don't know anything about Tom Pasquarello, but I feel like if I searched, I'm going to find a book by him about his time in the DEA.
Absolutely. I would bet money on it. You know what? Fuck it. Let's do it live.
Let's find out.
I'm Googling Tom Pasquarello. He's got a lot of op-eds. Oh, he's real pissed about them exchanging Brittany Griner for Victor.
Yes, it's a lot of his Google results blasting the deal.
No, I guess he didn't write he's now a business security director.
Yeah, maybe it's too soon. Maybe his career in security is still too active that he can't do his tell-all yet, and he's going to save it.
Yeah. Everybody that these characters were actually based on is younger than I expected. Like, I assumed they were all in their 70s.
Yes.
But now I think they're all like in their early to mid 50s. So.
He's still going. And for me, the first Google result that came up for his name was his LinkedIn. So I'm like, no, this guy's still working. He's not ready to fucking burn the bridges.
You can't open Pandora's box just yet.
No.
But I think in time, yes, we will get that book.
For sure.
Or he's making a big stink about this Brittany Griner trade. Maybe this will be like, I'm going to get my name out there.
There'll be a chapter. Yeah.
Maybe get on some panels.
Oh, yes.
Some news shows. And then I'll drop my book when, I'm hot.
Yeah. He probably already has the literary agent. He's just working it behind the scenes.
He's got the title too. I bet it's something steamy. So let's talk about Nick Cage a little bit.
Yeah.
Because this was kind of his last hurrah as like a top tier franchise star, like this part of his career. Right before this, he did Adaptation, Matchstick Men, and National Treasure. So your mileage may vary on the quality of those three movies. I happen to like all three of them. I really like Matchstick Men. I'm a sucker for a heist movie though.
I was going to say, I've never seen National Treasure. It's the butt of a million jokes and I need to get around to it at some point. But Adaptation and Matchstick Men, I think, are phenomenal and phenomenal Nick Cage performances. So like when I hold those up as like, okay, here's where he was in his career. And I go Adaptation, Matchstick Men, Lord of War. Lord of War looks even softer next to those other two.
But then he followed this up with World Trade Center, The Wicker Man.
Okay.
Future episode.
I can't wait for that.
And Ghost Rider, which we've already talked a little bit about Ghost Rider because we covered the directors.
Right.
And then National Treasure 2 was in the mix there, but that was a sequel to established hits. But then he starts coming out with stuff like Bangkok Dangerous and The Sorcerer's Apprentice and Knowing. So now he's firmly in his like, I'll do anything to pay my tax debt part of his career. But now more recently, he seems like he's rebounded.
Yes.
So I think probably Mandy was what kind of kind of started his renaissance
Okay.
to some extent. And then Pig, of course, which I loved.
You loved Pig. Yeah.
And The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent was a blast and is also having a moment on TikTok now. It's become a viral thing on there.
Oh, that's good. I really like that movie. You watched it first and you tipped me off to it. And then I thought it was great. I'm actually probably getting ready to watch it a second time now that I'm in my Pedro Pascal era.
Pedro, I mean, he's killing it. I'm rewatching Narcos right now, actually, just because I was like, I needed more Pedro in my life.
Nice.
He's so great in that show. It was the first time I remember. I don't know if that was pre-Game of Thrones. I think it was post-Game of Thrones, but whatever, not important. But he's got 5 movies in post-production right now and one currently filming. The big one that's probably the first one to come out is the horror comedy Renfield with Nicholas Hoult. So Holt's playing Renfield and Cage is playing Count Dracula.
Wow.
Should be a blast.
That's all I have to say about that. Yeah. It could go terribly wrong, but that could be really cool.
I'm withholding judgment, but I'll check it out at least on streaming. If the trailers and everything looks good, I might take a trip to the theater to see it.
Yeah.
We talked about Leto a lot pretty recently because he was the star of Morbius. But I wanted to point out at this point in his career, too, he was not doing great work in movies. Dallas Buyers Club in 2013 was when he moved onto the A-list as far as movies go.
Okay.
But he was a marginal movie star at this point in time, and he was really trying to be a rock star with 30 Seconds to Mars.
Right. I forgot he had that whole time in his life.
Still does, I think. They're still a band. I'm embarrassed to admit I owned that CD.
I forgive you.
Thank you. Bridget Moynihan never had a big movie career, but she is the catalyst behind John Wick killing people again. She plays Helen Wick.
Oh, okay.
His wife. That
I didn't realize.
It's the whole point. It's the whole point of the movie. She dies. You know.
Okay.
But that's all I'll say. So she pops up in them in flashback or like dream sequences. Still, she's not credited in the ballerina movie, but she's credited in the 4th one. So she'll probably pop up in there in a flashback.
Gotcha.
But she's been on TV playing Aaron Regan for 13 years on Blue Bloods, which is somehow a show that's been on for 13 years.
Man, that's one of those CBS standbys, right?
Yeah, they used to film it in the neighborhood I grew up in Queens.
Oh, wow.
They would always shut down blocks because there's a funeral home over there that they would film at a lot.
Did you ever see Selleck?
I never did, but I never checked for him either.
Okay.
They were always filming like in the middle of the day when I was at work or whatever.
Okay.
You always saw the notices that you can't park there on these days.
Just annoying then.
Yeah. And that's what I have for Lord of War. Was there anything else you wanted to? You gave us your big idea about the movie at the top.
Yeah. Did I spill all my beans?
Do you have any beans left, sir?
Let me drop a couple extra beans at the end here. I just wanted to say this movie, we brought this movie in to compare with War Dogs. And I do want to definitively say this movie is better than War Dogs because it does get more serious. Like you said, it has a point of view, has a message. I think it fumbles the message a little bit because it waits so long, so deep in the movie to even start to reckon with what's going on. And by the time it did that, I'm like, I thought you were telling me that this was just a fun, quirky guy who stages funny schemes and yucks it up with African dictators. So I'm like, yeah, I couldn't take the message, although it was there, I couldn't take it too seriously. And then they dropped a final quote, which maybe this will confuse our discourse about this entirely. But Yuri says this thing right at the end of the movie. He goes, "That's the secret to survival. Never go to war, especially with yourself." And I'm like, what does that mean? Like he lost everything at the end. So is he telling us that going straight was a mistake? That trying to have a wife and family was a mistake? Because really, you should be true to yourself. If you're a heartless demon who loves guns and wants to spread them around the world, that's what you should follow your heart.
It's a darker message than I think they were going for.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the message was. With everything in this movie, there was some messages that were being telegraphed out towards me. And I'm like, I'm not sure what you mean. I could see where we're at, like what territory we're talking about, but I could never quite tell.
That's fair. That's a pretty valid point. I feel like I said my piece on the movie, but I would recommend it to people because it's interestingly made and it doesn't feel like any other movie. It feels unique, which is an accomplishment in and of itself.
There's stuff to like about it. You know me. I always want to pull my punches at the end and go, it's fine.
Now, you had me a little nervous because you were like, I know you like this movie, but I think I'm going to be adversarial about it. And I said, okay, I'm gearing up. But no, I think every time we do this, we end up being mostly in agreement.
That's because we like to agree with each other. That's one of the themes of our show. It's finding agreement.
There's not a lot of conflict on the Blast Zone, which is a weird thing to say about a podcast named The Blast Zone. You'd expect some more fireworks.
Not as much blasting as you might think.
But next week, we're going balls to the wall. We're doing a surf drama from the 70s. So we're doing Big Wednesday.
Big Wednesday. I remember one thing from that movie. You want to know what it is?
What?
Hey, you guys. Split. Do you remember that line? Have you seen this movie? I only know one line from this movie. I saw it in my teens.
No, but now I'm going to be super excited to catch that line. Yeah. I mean, it's John Milius. We were just talking about him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He wrote and directed it. It was requested by a listener. And I was like, you know what? We don't do enough of these. We've been stuck in the 2000s for a while since Sorcerer. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go to the 70s.
This is going to be fun. This is going to take me back to all kinds of nostalgia.
The older movies don't do the best numbers, but we got to switch it up just for variety.
We do.
Thank you guys so much for listening once again. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. We appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Movie suggestions, feedback, love letters, recipes. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.